Hey folks, Ken here. How you doing? It's a getting dull Sunday afternoon in Dublin. I think it's been nice for most of the morning, but we're due to get thunderstorms later on. Quick update on the pond. Thankfully things are going better. As I mentioned last week, I was concerned about this Kohaku here, but he or she, we think it's a she, has settled down nicely. There's not as much gasping and it's eating. I was worried about flukes. Now I haven't seen any flashing in the last few days, and I think my problem is nitrite. I told you I got a new test kit. My previous test kit was showing me 0, which, given the fact I've added I think 7 fish over the last 6 or 8 weeks, just didn't make sense, given the filter's only been running since February and I'm only feeding since the end of March. So lo and behold, the new kit showed that I 0.25 going up to 0.5, and it's currently around 0.5 for nitrite. Ammonia was 0.25 but it's dropped down to 0. So the nitrite is concerning, but it's manageable. What I've done to manage it is I just really backed off on the feeding. I'm probably feeding at the minute a quarter of what I was doing. So it's keeping, I'm just checking it every morning. It fluctuates between 0.25 and 5. Hopefully over the next week or so it starts to go down, but the news is the fish are all looking well and they appear to have stopped flashing. They could make liars of me now and flash, but I certainly haven't seen it in the last few days. What I've done is, as well, on advice from a friend of mine, is added a bit of salt. He gave me this. It's Wilson Salt. It's a UK company, wilsonsalt.com. It's in Belfast, actually. It's dried vacuum salt. So I believe for aquarium or koi pond use, you don't use salt with any anti-caking agents or iodine or whatever else they put in it. I don't know if it's iodine or something. And as well, adding salt to a pond, you need to have a salt meter, and that's something I got over the last week as well from Amazon. It's an Apera salt meter. The one thing I find with salt, I put probably the amount that's in that bag. I had about twice in it. There's a cup in there as well, but it's still probably about 5 or 6 cups in it now, maybe even more than that. But reading up on it for treating a koi pond, and it does help maintain their slime coat and also helps against nitrite and can help against some flukes. Now this measures in parts per thousand, or PPT. If I put it in, we'll just see. I added some salt again this morning, just wiggle it around. You can see there it's reading 0.5. Now that's a fair amount of salt gone in. The water out of the tap is 0.2. The temperature gauge, by the way, is not accurate, which kind of makes me wonder whether the salt salinity reading is hugely accurate. But I think, given a reference against the tap water, it's at least telling me that there has been an increase in salinity, so I'll try and keep it around that. The other thing that I did do initially when I started adding the salt, it made sense to turn off the trickle in. However, when I did that, about 24 hours later, I noticed my pond level have dropped by about 1 inch, and initially I thought, oh god, I must have a leak. But then it just dawned on me that the reason it's dropping is because of the drum, the combi filter. Of course, it flushes with water from the clean side and that goes out to waste. So the drum is cleaning probably twice an hour, and that's what's dropping the water down. So it dropped down to an extent where it was below my skimmer, so my skimmer wasn't working. So what I'll do is, the salt seems to be helping. Yeah, it could be complete coincidence, but I think it is doing something, so I'll keep it around that 0.5. I'll just add the bit I have left there, add a bit every day just to keep it up, and as I say, the fish are looking well, and hopefully that nitrite should start to come down as the filter matures. So what Steve Wainwright in the comments asked last week if I could do a walk around the garden, which I'll do, and I'll start on this side. Just to warn you that some people may find these scenes distressing. So we're lucky we live in a detached house, so we've gates on either side, and this sort of leads in to what was built about 20 years ago as a dog shed, which you've probably seen in other videos. We now have the combi filter in here, so this was full of gardening equipment and bits and pieces of junk over 20 years, so needed a lot of clearing out, and the floor lowered slightly for the combi to get the level. But this is now all the koi stuff, bits and pieces of leftover pond food, and the filter, so nice and neat and done. We have some recycling here, but everything is kind of okay in that order. What I had to do as well, while building out the spur from this tap, which goes in along here and out the back and around the back, and that feeds my trickle flow into the filter. I did take up this slab, but I just put it back down yesterday, if you can see. Initially I did try and put it back down with just sand underneath it, but it didn't work. Obviously sand compacts and the slab sank, so it wasn't ideal. So I just mixed up a good strong mix of mortar and cemented it back in place as the other way it was done originally, so hopefully that should now be done. One left job to worry about. This patio area, before we did the new pond, we did have some furniture here, but it was about 20 years old and it had rotted, so we broke it up and put it in a skip, and we do need to replace it. But to be honest, with so much going on in the garden, we're unlikely to do anything this year, but this needs a bit of a clean up, and I think that some of the patio needs repointing, which I'll get to. This, by the way, the birds were on the camera, a load of starlings, and they were picking in between the slabs for some reason, probably looking for food or worms or something, but they made an awful mess, which I'll clear up. So this does need to be cleaned up, but basically it's kind of good to go. We'll get some new furniture, clean it up and do a bit of repointing. A bit of crap there on the back that we need to clean up as well. A few pots my wife wants to keep for planting. What we're going to do with this area is here is just put in stones. So we're going to dig it out a bit and put down some anti-weed fabric and stones along there. We're thinking of concrete paths, but we probably just go with the stones. I think they're easier to do. I'll probably have to lift this shore a bit. If you remember from previous videos, that shore was there, but I dug it out and it was concreted in, which was a bugger of a job. And what I've done is I've run a spur of this along here into the back of the shed, and this drain is new, and that's where the combi drains into. So that's where all my water was disappearing, and I thought I had a leak the other day from the trickle flow. So the trickle in is really, you know, when you have a drum and you're cleaning from the pond water in the filter, as most people do. Some use tap water, but for me the pump sits in the clean side. It's actually in the media, the moving bed side of the filter, and it takes water from there obviously, so it's from the pond and it's going to drop the level of the pond over time. So that's that drain there. So as well as that, we decided we were thinking about concrete for paths around the pond. We're going to go with stones again, so this is going to have to be dug out a bit more. And as well, this step was here when we got the garden done originally, but the old pond was in this area and there was sort of a granite bed around it. So what I will do is, or get done, is have this just extended. We've a couple of slabs the same at the top, and get some of that red block, and I'll have to dig out here and see a couple of seagulls. Have to see how I do that, but I think it should be easy enough just to cut one of those and drop it in here with the red block and create a step there the same. Just continue that across and then have stones here and raise this up and have stones. And we were thinking of getting some of that. It's okay here, but as we get onto the grass part, is get some of that plastic tin edging just to go along to create a barrier between the stone path and the grass. So that's going to happen right around the pond at the back. I'm probably going to have to lag these. Unlikely I'll keep the back part of the pond running with the waterfall over the winter when the covers are on, but I still want to lag them just to make sure they don't freeze, because even I think I'll be bringing that level up a bit up to the grass here, but I don't think it'll be up enough to cover those pipes completely. It's at the back, it's not a big worry. And here I did mention distressing scenes. This is not great here. We used to have a greenhouse here, and the washing line was here, and I used to nearly decapitate myself every time I was working on the old pond, which if you see on previous videos was kind of in this kind of, can't see my hands, this kind of area here. It was much smaller, obviously it was only about 2,000 litres, but again building a step here because the garden is in 2 levels, similar to the one over the side, so probably do something. There is spare slab and a few red bricks and bring it up, and the ground level here, if you look, is kind of up to where that drain is, so it's a fair bit of backfilling has to be done. This is not quite up to the level of the rest of the garden yet. This is part of the problem, is getting all these levels right and leveling that out. As many of you will know, is no easy job. That hider range I'd love to get rid of. I think it's in a bad place, but my wife thinks otherwise. What we were going to do here was probably try to minimise the amount of grass and just end the grass along here, and maybe have this stoned in and maybe a circular sort of paved area here. We could even put the washing line in the middle of it, or have somewhere to sit out or something, because it is fairly sheltered. Probably will move the wheelbarrow when I do that. I did decide to keep that barrel there just in case I want to top up or treat or do something. I don't know, it's handy to have a water butt. But that's the plan for this side. And if I walk over towards here, you can see, you know, there's just, the garden's kind of got away from us over the last year. These were stone beds that, I don't know, for some reason they've risen there. There was a plant there, a bush we got rid of. It's probably the roots of that, but these were all fairly flat and neat stone. And what we did was, originally, because we got that extension built, you can see out the back there, and the double garage was built, this was all grass originally, and it was a pain in the arse to maintain it. So part of the job nearly 20 years ago was to minimise the amount of grass. So these were all fairly decent beds, but you can see weeds. I sprayed them all earlier on to hopefully get rid of them. So I think our plan is to tidy up some of these plants. The bushes and that are okay. Some of them are going to come out. I think that one at the very back there, you can see that's withered. My wife wants to get rid of that. I think it's half dead anyway, but that's fairly well rooted. I think we need to get a tree surgeon to do that, but just to replenish and level off all the stones here. So get a few tons of stones, which is not particularly expensive. There is that sort of Napex anti-weed material, but to be honest, when you look around, it doesn't work that particularly well, particularly over time. But we will, you know, clean up and replenish these stones, and again probably get the bordering, the plastic bordering along, just to have a barrier between the stones and the grass. But there's a shitload of work to do there. This big bald patch that I tried to seed, and it's kind of looks like the top of my own head with bits of grass and not bits of grass. I seed it again, and I have a bit of compost to put down with the seed. This is fairly flat. This is where the swimming pool, if you look at old pictures or videos, that I kept the one koi and a few goldfish in when we were building the pond, and we demolished the old pond. They were in it from about the end of June last year to the end of November, when we eventually got them into the pond. Luckily the weather was still fairly mild up to the end of November, because as these things go, originally when we started the end of June, my plan was to have the fish back in the pond in September, early mid-September at the latest, but of course for lots of reasons that didn't happen, as it generally doesn't. So I need to sow that again. This is fairly flat. This is okay, this sort of area. Okay, it's not as brilliant, but we can level it out a bit. There's not much to be done. However, you can see over here, this is where the machinery, so when we did the demolishing of the old pond, it was granite and concrete and rock, so it was a big job even to demolish what was a 2,000 litre pond, and it was concreted at the top that I did myself. It used to be liner, there was a 2-level top and bottom, but the liner at the top leaked very badly, ended up leaking very badly at the bottom as well, but it was 20 years old, so they owed us nothing. That was a large part of the reason we built this one. But all the machinery, we've had diggers, we've had dumpers. When we dug out the old pond and dug the foundation, and you'll see photographs, you look back at old videos, we got a digger in and a driver for the digger, so the guy in a day and a half dug the whole lot. So there was 2 parts to it. He came along, looked at the job and said, yeah, I'll do it. He had a 9-ton truck and a trailer on the back, and he towed his digger on the back, and he said, if you hire a dumper and I load up the dumper and you drive the dumper in and out, then, you know, I'll dig it for and take away all the, well, most of the waste for €1,500, which was not a bad price, and there was another €200 on that to have the dumper for a couple of days. So we have a side gate down here, luckily enough. So one of the big questions when I started getting quotes is, oh, you want to build a big pond, that's great, but do you have access? Luckily we do. I know not everybody has, and I've seen some very creative solutions with grabbers and cranes and all sorts of things, but luckily we do have the access. The only thing is, it's cobble lock, and cobble lock is great, but the guy said, you know, normally he'd like to have his 9-ton truck close by and load from the digger straight into the 9-ton truck, but you can't drive a 9-ton truck over cobble lock because it would destroy it. I mean, it's even there, but that's been there from nearly day one, from the car driving over it. But you can see here on the cobble lock, there's a pile of hardcore here needs to go. That was the 1-ton dumper going in and out, driven by me, but you can see the cobble lock as it was coming over did not fare well. Now that just needs to be taken up, and probably a bit of hardcore or something put down and it relayed. Probably not a job for me, I'll get somebody in to do it, but it does need to be done. So you can see, but the grass is in bad shape here. Now I've had the builder in that did a fair bit of the block work and so forth on the pond, and his suggestion is, originally I was looking at, I didn't think I'd enough soil for backfilling, but as it turned out, I too much. I've got all the sort of back and sides mostly backfilled and want to put stone in. In fact, when I look at it, I've probably backfilled a bit too much in some places, and I said at the front I'm going to have to dig it out to get the stone in and get a, you know, a sufficient level of stone. But this needs to go. We were planning on maybe using that to level off parts of the lawn, but to be honest with you, it's rock hard, there's stones in it, it's not ideal, it's not going to be right. So I think what we need to do is get some lawn sand, and I believe that's different from ordinary sand. They use it a lot on golf courses for greens and so forth, but it makes it relatively easy to level a lawn. So what I think I'll do is, the builder at the minute is pricing up a few things to get the garden back in order, but definitely I think he said that topsoil needs to go, we don't need it. This hardcore as well needs to go. Originally I was planning concrete pads, and part of the plan was that as I backfilled, I just used the hardcore to put around, and I was going to concrete in the back here as well. But you know, if you don't have to, it's probably not a good idea to concrete in pipes. Unlikely I'll have to get to them anytime in the near future or medium term, but if you don't have to concrete them in, probably best not to do that. So anyway, that's the job we have asked the gardener or the builder to come back with. So he does all sorts of garden landscaping and building work, from extensions and now the ponds. That's his first pond. So we'll see what he comes back with, but I don't think it's going to be cheap. It's all, this kind of work is all fairly labour intensive. And if anyone's any tips on getting rid of weeds, it's grass. Like we had, I think, sand sitting there, killed the grass, but the weeds survive. And the same there, we had a few blocks there. So a bit soul destroying with the weeds. The other thing we've asked for a price on is a pergola for the pond. Again, given the size of the pond, it's about just over 5 metres long and 3 metres wide. It ain't going to be cheap, but we're looking at obviously wood with either a corrugated, tinted kind of perspex or polycarbonate type of roof. And it will need 3 posts anyway this side. I was thinking it was 6 posts, 3 either side. But the builder was saying, you know, if you put posts in here, you're going to mess up the walkway through there. So what he was saying was to attach this side of the pergola to the shed wall, which I think makes a lot of sense. And maybe just need 1 post on this side down the back and 3 posts, and maybe have a little bit of an overhang into the patio so that if it's raining, as it does, and I need to feed or do something, at least have a bit of shelter. So I'm kind of expecting that job, to be honest. You know, €2,000, I think, euro would probably, if anyone thinks any different, let me know, but that's the kind of number I have in my head, to be honest, for that type of job. You know, especially even, you know, polycarbonate for that size. I know one of the jobs I have to do before the end of the summer is build covers, and you know, polycarbonate alone, which would be cut to size in fairness for that pond, and probably get a piece for the top as well. You're talking about €350 for the polycarbonate alone, probably a bit more, and then a bit of wood to build a frame to suspend it on. So that's all. So that's the plans on the garden. If you've any questions or suggestions, let me know. As I say, lots of work to do. The focus has really been on getting the pond right, you know, getting the filter in, and you know, those things aren't cheap, as many of you know. So it was just a matter of, you know, there isn't an endless supply of budget, as most of us, it's a position most of us are in. It's just a matter of prioritising. So the garden took a little bit of a back seat, but I think we really would like to get it into some type of shape before the end of the summer, and be in a position certainly for next summer to be putting garden furniture back out again. The garden furniture, you know, you can buy cheap stuff, you buy cheap, you buy twice. We want to get sort of decent stuff again. It's all about prioritising, and I think the pergola over the pond and the getting the lawn back into some sort of shape in the garden is probably going to be prioritised over that. So if you like this and you want to see more, hit like. If you want to get notified of new videos, hit subscribe. And if you have any suggestions or questions, just let me know. And until then, I'll talk to you again. Cheers, thanks.